Ladies and gentlemen, this is internet personality Vangelus, and when the Alternity line debuted in 2009, its arrival was heralded by none other than the aggregate Optimus Prime, Alternity Convoy. This is his hybrid red version, the most Optimus of his various color schemes. The callbacks to alternators and Binaltech begin with the concept of scale. This Nissan GTR alt mode is aiming for the 1:32 scale, smaller than its predecessor line, but similarly impressive in appearance. The red is slick and glossy, with a finish added even on parts that are molded that color. Other colors are minimal but cleanly applied, adding only what's needed to put a veil of realism over this alt mode. Other Binaltechian traits manifest in the use of rubber tires and the attempt at a detailed interior. You can open the doors to see the seats and other car bits within. The hood also pops off to show this convoy's horsepower. Finally, the trunk can open entirely for the sake of opening, since there's absolutely no room for anything to actually store in there, other than like lint or sand or blood. Rolling well thanks to both its tire traction and super clean underbelly, Convoy's vehicle mode gives a great first impression upon opening the toy. So let's see what happens when we open the car. Oddly akin to the Chevy Aveo Swerve figure, Alternity Convoy's transformation is a weirdly bordered fusion of engineering aesthetics. Below the belt, his legs transform a lot like the alternator toys of old, with demented complexities of panels folding on panels folding on panels. Sadly, there's a construction issue that prevents the whole thing from coming together happily, as the ankle peg connections that unite the assemblies don't quite fit their holes properly. They can wedge together, but be careful about cracking the clear slot. The central core of the figure switches gears immensely into some late 2000s Movieverse automorph with a two-stage semi-automatic transformation that unfolds and compresses a whole lot of the figure. That more modern-for-its-time engineering carries through the rest of the upper body, greatly resembling a Revenge of the Fallen toy, as everything folds a whole lot, but with a little more solidity than the lower body. It's a daunting process overall for many first-timers, but as long as you do things in the right order, you'll soon have a pan-dimensional avatar of Cullitude standing on your desk. Alternity Convoy's robot mode fuses aesthetics once again, taking a classic Binaltech body and tightening many of its sections in the manner of a Movieverse toy. I adore the torso core between its shining pelvis, gleaming abs, and the magically thinner hood chest. The head sculpt is also a cool take on the usual Optimus look, taking many of the angles and sweeping them back slightly, adding a subtle aerodynamic feel. The colors on the hybrid red version are straight up Optimus Prime, perhaps using a bit more red but placing the proper blue where it can fit in. I sort of wish the crotch featured some of that blue, but the silver paint is so very pretty to look at. There is a bit of chunk to this guy, especially in his shins, but I dig it. There is a lump of backpack, but I think it clings pretty tightly to Convoy's spine. His shoulder doors may be a bit obnoxious for some. Thankfully, they are adjustable, though they still wave around when you start posing Convoy in any way that swings his arms forward or backward. Alternity Convoy has got a lot of joints. So his head is on a ball joint connection. It's not too limited. He gets a good range of motion out of every axis, and it's fun. He can kind of just get all up in your face, going like, "What? What do you want? What?" His whole torso otherwise doesn't really have any joints. There's no ab joint. There's no waist joint. The transformation kind of nullifies a lot of that potential. And I used to think there was a way it could have fit in, but I think just given the dimensions of what they're working with, there is a limitation there. Maybe there could have been a cut underneath this belt, but I think that might have just ended up being more impeded or more fragile than I would have wanted. His shoulders are kind of a bummer. Now, they're already kind of set far back, with this thing kind of making an illusion of the shoulders being in the right place, but when you move them forward, they are all the way back here, and his hands kind of can't really reach far past the front of his mono boob. That's a little bit of a bummer. The other thing that's a bit difficult is the outwards motion. Now, there's a joint to move the shoulder outwards, and the door chunk, the car chunk, is on another joint that is situated right above the pin of the shoulder joint. So there is a bit of allowance if you learn how this thing works to get some decent looking outward motion, kind of provided you're looking at him from the front. But it's all a little bit hindered by these chunks here and by the placement of the arms being all the way back here. His elbows can bend a nice solid 90 degrees. There is a bicep swivel that's fully functional. The wrists are on ball joints that have pretty good range of mush in terms of moving more so than just swiveling in place. So his arms are a little bit of a bummer, mostly due to the shoulders. His hips sound lovely. Right there with that ratchet. There's also an outward motion that is not ratcheted. There is, it's not really a thigh swivel, but it functions as one. It's right above the knee joint. Knee joint is a real hard, clicky ratchet. And overall, this is a pretty decent range of leg posability. The bummer down here comes from his feet. Now, his feet are kind of crazy. They don't really peg together properly due to the way that they were assembled at the factory, etc. Mine haven't actually cracked back here, but his ankles, they're on ball joints, but they don't really do anything. And whenever you're balancing him, you kind of just have to find a place where at least one edge of his foot's touching the ground, and this spike back here is touching the ground. That means a lot of poses can get a bit difficult because his feet don't plant quite properly unless he's in a very... I find he's posable, but there are a limited number of poses he can stay standing in. And that's kind of compounded by the fact that, number one, he's way back heavy, and this forward and backward ratchet is not actually super strong. And I've heard reports of other versions of this mold, you know, in other colors, having real bad tippity-backety problems, and just kind of collapsing on the floor. Now, mine stands okay, provided I find his proper center of balance. For standing, it's kind of legs a bit splayed apart, hip thrust slightly forward, and in terms of other poses, I can get him to do stuff here and there, but no matter what it is he's doing, he also is kind of limited by the fact that his arms are a vaguely flawed little bit of design. I think some of this comes from his lineage. He is, not just in transformation, but just in engineering in general, very much a weird fusion of the mid-2000s alternator vinyl techs along with the newer engineering tech that was being learned from animated and the first two movie lines. So, he's not unposable, he's just not quite as posable as he seems. It's the best way I can put it. This guy kicked off the Alternity line, which has more or less come and gone as of this recording, and looking back on him, I think some of the figures aged alright. The car mode is beautiful even 4 years later, and that transformation, as someone who nerds volcanoes of gibber over interesting engineering, the fusion of mid-2000s Binaltech conversion aesthetics with late 2000s movieverse conversion aesthetics, makes me over-conversational to this day. Unfortunately, a robot mode that felt sort of limited in 2009 feels hardcore dated nowadays. It's got a lot of the right moving parts and a great standing look, but it is just hamstrung by the poorly placed and surprisingly limited shoulders. This guy has 2 or 3 poses that look great and a whole lot that kind of ask for very particular camera placement. Anyway, this has been Internet Personality Vangelus, and there is a bit of relevancy to looking at this toy today, because it sort of came back a few years after its debut. Are you ready to race?